In the scorching silence of a desert, a rich man with a closed-off expression arrives on a white horse, moving slowly through a remote village. He dismounts in front of a dry stake and ties the horse without looking back, ignoring the extreme heat and lack of water. A thin, dust-covered boy watches in silence, unsettled. The man disappears into a tent as the horse sniffs the dry air, struggling to move. When the boy tries to help, he's pushed away. But later that night, he returns, and from that moment on, nothing remains the same. Love stories with animals? Then subscribe now and don't miss out. Thanks for following along. Now, back to the story. The merciless Arizona sun beat down on Copper Canyon without mercy that late morning. The sand undulated in the distance, like a waterless sea, and the heat made the horizon shimmer like a mirage. The silence of that remote region was broken only by the dry sound of hooves on the hot earth. A young man with an imposing appearance slowly crossed the small town, mounted on a white horse with a firm posture and gleaming coat. His clean, well-cut clothes contrasted with the poor surroundings, and his eyes scanned the small settlement with contained disdain, like someone passing through a place only out of obligation. Without addressing anyone, he dismounted in front of an old wooden stake near the entrance to the town, and with firm, impatient movements tied the horse to the dried-out trunk. Completely ignoring the absence of shade or water in the spot, he turned his back on the animal and walked toward an improvised tent specially set up for his rest. The townspeople, accustomed to the harshness of life, watched in silence. No one dared question his attitude. Some looked away, others merely frowned. But among those watching the scene was a boy, barefoot, thin, covered in desert dust, who couldn't take his eyes off the horse. 12-year-old Ethan Miller had lived in Copper Canyon all his life, though most townsfolk barely noticed him. With his worn-out clothes and permanent layer of dust covering his sun-browned skin, he blended into the landscape like another desert feature. His mother had disappeared 3 years ago after a terrible dispute with the local landowner, leaving behind only whispered rumors and a small silver medallion that Ethan kept hidden under his tattered shirt. Since then, he'd survived on the margins of society, doing odd jobs and scavenging what he could. The boy, accustomed to wandering the edges of the town in search of scraps, was intrigued by the abandonment of the animal. At first, he limited himself to observing from a distance, respecting the space imposed not by words, but by the evident social difference. However, as the hours passed and the horse remained there, motionless and increasingly debilitated in the baking heat, something within urged him to act. The white stallion stood with its head low, occasionally stamping a hoof against the dry earth. Its coat, though still beautiful, had collected a fine layer of red dust, and its eyes, deep, intelligent eyes, looked toward the town periodically as if expecting its master's return. But the stranger remained inside the tent, conferring with local officials about matters unknown to Ethan. The smell of cooking fires drifted through the air as afternoon shadows began to stretch across the dusty main street. Ethan's stomach growled. He hadn't eaten since the previous evening when Mrs. Lawson from the general store had given him leftover cornbread. But the horse's situation bothered him more than his own hunger. "That ain't right," he muttered to himself, watching the magnificent animal standing unprotected from the elements. The horse's sides heaved with labored breathing in the heat. Without shelter or water, it wouldn't last long in the punishing desert climate. During the afternoon, Ethan approached stealthily, bringing a small clay pot with water and a piece of stale bread. It was enough for Mrs. Walker, an elderly resident, to sternly push him away, fearing reprisals from the unknown visitor. "Get back, boy," she hissed, gripping his bony shoulder. "That's Mr. Winchester's horse, and he don't take kindly to folks touching his property." "But, Ma'am, the horse needs water," Ethan protested, his voice thin but determined. Mrs. Walker's weathered face softened slightly. I know, child, but that man's got connections with the copper mine owners. Best not to cross him. Ethan backed away, but he didn't give up. He retreated to his makeshift shelter, a lean-to constructed from discarded wooden crates behind the blacksmith's shop, and waited. The blacksmith, Mr. Henderson, tolerated Ethan's presence because the boy sometimes helped sweep the shop or run errands without asking for payment. As darkness fell, the temperature dropped rapidly, as it always did in the desert. The town lights dimmed one by one as residents retired for the night. Ethan wrapped himself in his thin blanket, waiting, listening to the coyotes calling in the distance. His hand unconsciously touched the medallion beneath his shirt, a circular piece of silver with an unusual crest, depicting an eagle over a mountain. His mother had given it to him before she vanished, telling him it was important, though she never explained why. In the pre-dawn hours, when the cold desert air numbed his fingers and everyone slept, Ethan made his move. Clutching a dented canteen of water and a handful of alfalfa he'd quietly collected from behind the livery stable, he crept through the silent town. The horse, once skittish, seemed to recognize him. It allowed the boy to approach. The animal's eyes were heavy but alive, reflecting the faint starlight. Ethan spoke in soft whispers as he approached, holding out his hand palm up in a non-threatening gesture. "Easy there, fella. I ain't gonna hurt you." The horse's ears flicked forward, and it extended its muzzle cautiously toward the boy's hand. Its breath was warm against Ethan's skin. "That's it," Ethan murmured. "I'm just here to help." He offered the water first, cradling the canteen while the horse drank greedily. Then came the alfalfa, which the animal consumed with equal enthusiasm. As the horse ate, Ethan gently stroked its neck, feeling the strong muscles beneath the dusty coat. "You're a fine horse," he said softly. "Too fine to be left out here like this." His fingers brushed against something under the horse's mane, a brand nearly obscured by the animal's white hair. Ethan couldn't make out the design in the darkness, but something about it made him curious. He traced the outline with his fingertip, feeling the raised scar tissue beneath the coarse hair. The sky began to lighten in the east, signaling the approaching dawn. Ethan reluctantly backed away from the horse. "I'll come back tonight," he promised. "Don't you worry." As he turned to leave, the horse whickered softly, as if in gratitude or understanding. The sound warmed something inside Ethan's chest, a place that had felt cold and empty since his mother's disappearance. For the first time in years, he felt a connection to something living, something that seemed to need him as much as he needed it. That morning, as Copper Canyon awakened to another scorching day, the townspeople noticed something different about the abandoned horse. Though still tied to the stake, it held its head higher and its eyes seemed more alert. A few people wondered aloud who might have helped the animal, but most were too concerned with their own struggles to give it much thought. Ethan kept his distance during daylight hours, but he watched from shadowy corners, making sure the horse wasn't further mistreated. The stranger, Mr. Winchester, Mrs. Walker had called him, remained in meetings with the town officials, apparently unconcerned about his mount's welfare. The routine continued for 3 days. Each night, Ethan would visit the horse, bringing water and whatever food he could scrounge. Each morning, he would retreat to the margins of town life, invisible to most, but always keeping an eye on his new friend. And each day, the horse seemed to look for him, its head turning to follow his movements whenever he passed within sight. On the 4th night, while everyone slept and the desert wind whispered through the canyon, Ethan made a discovery that would change everything. As he groomed the horse's neck with a piece of burlap, his fingers, once again, found the brand beneath the mane. This time, with the moon higher and brighter, he could see the mark clearly, an eagle over a mountain identical to the medallion he wore around his neck. His heart nearly stopped. With trembling hands, he pulled out his medallion, holding it. Up beside the brand, There could be no mistake. They were the same symbol. "How can this be?" he whispered, his voice barely audible even to himself. The horse nudged his shoulder gently, as if encouraging him to solve the mystery. And in that moment, under the vast Arizona sky filled with stars, Ethan felt something he hadn't experienced in years, a flicker of hope that perhaps he wasn't as alone in the world as he had thought. The news spread through Copper Canyon like wildfire. Someone was caring for the stranger's abandoned horse. Most townsfolk suspected it was Ethan Miller, the orphaned boy who drifted between the shadows of their small community. But no one said anything directly. Some approved silently, nodding to themselves when they saw the horse looking stronger each day. Others worried about the consequences should Mr. Winchester discover the interference. Sheriff Tom Bradley watched the situation with growing concern. A tall man with graying temples and eyes that had seen too much of life's hardships, he had always kept a protective eye on Ethan from a distance. The boy reminded him of himself at that age, stubborn, resourceful, and far too acquainted with loss. The sheriff had known Ethan's mother, Sarah Miller, a kind woman who had worked as a seamstress in town until her sudden disappearance 3 years ago. The official story was that she had abandoned her son and fled town, but Bradley had never believed it. "That boy's playing with fire," he muttered to himself as he observed Ethan from the doorway of his office, watching how the child discreetly checked on the horse while pretending to do something else. Miss Eleanor Harper, the town schoolteacher, overheard him as she passed by. "Perhaps," she replied softly, "but that horse would be dead by now if not for him." Bradley sighed. "Winchester's connected to the Prescott mining family. If he takes offense, then perhaps someone should remind Mr. Winchester of his responsibilities and to his animal," Eleanor said firmly. She had tried many times to convince Ethan to attend school, but the boy was too consumed with daily survival to sit in a classroom. Still, she left books where he could find them and pretended not to notice, when they disappeared only to reappear days later. As the days passed, Ethan's bond with the horse grew stronger. He had begun to call the animal Ghost for its white coat and the way it seemed to appear in his life like an apparition from another world. Ghost now recognized Ethan's footsteps and would turn his head expectantly whenever the boy approached. The initial wariness had transformed into trust, a rare commodity in both their lives. One morning, Ethan arrived to find an old man studying Ghost intently. The boy froze, instinctively stepping back into the shadows of a nearby building. The man was Ben Crowley, who ran the general store and was known for his sharp eyes and sharper memory. Crowley circled the horse slowly, examining the animal with the scrutiny of someone who recognized quality when he saw it. "You can come out, boy," Crowley called without turning around. "I know you've been caring for this fella." Ethan hesitated, then stepped forward. "I ain't doing no harm, Mr. Crowley." The old man smiled, the creases around his eyes deepening. "No harm at all. In fact, I'd say you've done this animal a great service." He reached out and gently brushed the horse's mane aside, revealing the brand. "But I wonder if you know what you've gotten yourself into." Ethan's hand instinctively went to his chest, where his medallion hung concealed beneath his shirt. "What do you mean?" Crowley's weathered finger traced the outline of the brand. "This here's the Blackwood crest, eagle over a mountain. Used to be a powerful family up north before the territory wars 15 years back." "Blackwood," Ethan repeated. The name unfamiliar yet somehow resonant. Good folks mostly. Had a big ranch outside Prescott. Finest horses in the territory. Crowley's voice took on the rhythmic quality of a natural storyteller. But there was trouble. Land disputes, water rights, the usual things men kill each other over in these parts. A chill ran down Ethan's spine despite the morning heat. What happened to them? Family got scattered. The old man died in the fighting. 2 sons went separate ways. One, raised by an uncle back east, became a fancy businessman. The other son, just a baby, then disappeared with his mother. Crowley looked at Ethan with newfound interest. Nobody knew what became of them. Ethan swallowed hard. And this symbol, it belongs to them? It does indeed. Crowley nodded toward Ghost. And this fine animal carries their brand, which means he came from Blackwood stock. Horses like this don't just appear in a place like Copper Canyon. Mr. Winchester brought him, Ethan said cautiously. Winchester, Crowley repeated, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. Can't say I know the name, but he bears watching. Anyone who treats a Blackwood horse this way. He didn't finish the thought. After Crowley left, Ethan sat in the dirt beside Ghost, his mind racing. Could there be a connection between the medallion his mother had given him and this horse? It seemed impossible, yet the identical symbols couldn't be coincidence. For the first time, he examined his medallion in full daylight, not just by moonlight or hidden in shadow. The silver was tarnished, but still caught the sunlight. The eagles, wings spread protectively over the mountain peak, just as they did in Ghost's brand. On the back, something he'd never noticed before, tiny engraved letters nearly worn away. E.B. His heart hammered in his chest. His name was Ethan Miller, not Ethan Blackwood, yet doubt crept in. His mother had always been vague about his father, saying only that he was gone. Could she have changed their name, hidden their past? Ethan was so lost in thought that he didn't notice Sheriff Bradley approaching until the man's shadow fell across him. "Morning, Ethan," the sheriff said. His voice was casual, but his eyes were serious. Ethan quickly tucked the medallion back under his shirt. "Morning, Sheriff." Bradley crouched down beside him, lowering his voice. "You've done a fine job with this horse, son, but Winchester's been asking questions. Says someone's been tampering with his property." Fear gripped Ethan's stomach. Is he mad? Let's just say he's particular about his possessions. The sheriff studied Ghost, noting the improved condition. "I've told him the town has a collective water trough that any animal tied up nearby can access. Technically not a lie, though. I might have neglected to mention that the trough was you." Ethan relaxed slightly, grateful for the sheriff's protection. "That said," Bradley continued, "it might be wise to be a bit more discreet with your visits. And maybe let me handle bringing water during daylight hours. I am the law around here. After all, he can hardly object to that." "Yes, sir," Ethan agreed, though his expression remained troubled. The sheriff placed a gentle hand on the boy's shoulder. "Something else bothering you, son?" Ethan hesitated, then slowly pulled out his medallion. "Sheriff, did you know my mother well?" Bradley's eyes widened slightly at the sight of the Blackwood crest. "Well enough," he said carefully. "Sarah was a private woman, kept to herself mostly, but was kind to everyone. Did she ever mention the name Blackwood?" A shadow passed over the sheriff's face. "Where did you hear that name?" "Mr. Crowley said this symbol belongs to the Blackwood family." Ethan pointed to the brand on Ghost's neck. "And it's the same as my medallion. My mother gave it to me before she went away." Bradley was silent for a long moment. "Your mother arrived in Copper Canyon 12 years ago with a baby. You never spoke much about where she came from or who your father was?" He sighed heavily. "There were rumors, of course. Always are in small towns. Some said she was running from something. Others thought she was hiding something valuable." "Like what?" "Never knew. But when Joseph Prescott came to town about 3 years back, interested in buying up mining claims, your mother got mighty nervous. Started talking about leaving town. Then one day she was gone." The sheriff's gaze grew, distant. "I searched for her, followed every lead I could find, but it was like she'd vanished into thin air." Ethan's throat tightened. "You think something bad happened to her? That she didn't just leave me?" Bradley put a hand on the boy's shoulder. "Sarah Miller loved you more than anything in this world, Ethan. Never doubt that. Whatever reasons she had for disappearing, abandoning you wasn't one of them." Those words lodged themselves in Ethan's heart. a small comfort in the wilderness of uncertainty that had been his life for the past 3 years. The conversation was interrupted by the approaching sound of boot heels on hard-packed dirt. Both turned to see Mr. Winchester striding purposefully toward them, his expensive clothes immaculate despite the dust and heat. Up close, he was younger than Ethan had initially thought, perhaps 30 years old, with sharp features and calculating eyes that reminded Ethan of a hawk surveying potential prey. "Sheriff," Winchester acknowledged with a curt nod, "I see you've taken an interest in my horse." "Just ensuring the animal's welfare, Mr. Winchester," Bradley replied evenly, "as is my duty as keeper of the peace in Copper Canyon." Winchester's gaze shifted to Ethan, who fought the urge to step back. "And who might this be?" "Ethan Miller," the sheriff answered before Ethan could speak. "Local boy, good with animals." Winchester studied Ethan with an intensity that made the boy uncomfortable. "Is that so? And has young Mr. Miller been good with my horse specifically?" Ethan met the man's gaze. "Someone had to give him water, sir. He was suffering." A flash of something, anger, surprise, crossed Winchester's face, quickly masked by a cool smile. "Indeed, how charitable of you." He turned back to the sheriff. "I'll be concluding my business in town today, Sheriff. Please ensure my horse is ready for departure by sundown." As Winchester walked away, Ethan felt a crushing weight in his chest. Ghost would be leaving with him. The realization hurt more than he'd expected. In the week since the horse had appeared in his life, Ethan had found something he'd been missing since his mother vanished. A connection, a purpose. "I don't want him to take Ghost," Ethan whispered. The sheriff squeezed his shoulder. "I know, son, but the law's the law. The horse is his property." That evening, as the sun painted the western sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Ethan came to say goodbye to Ghost. He brought a sugar cube he'd begged from Mrs. Lawson at the general store, a special treat for their last meeting. "You be strong," he murmured, stroking the horse's velvety muzzle. "Don't let him mistreat you again." Ghost nuzzled against Ethan's palm, his dark eyes seeming to understand. Ethan pressed his forehead against the horse's neck, breathing in the animal's earthy scent, memorizing the sensation. "I won't forget you," he promised. As he turned to leave, something caught his eye, a small object glinting in the fading light. It was partially hidden in the folds of the saddle blanket, which had been placed nearby in preparation for Winchester's departure. Curious, Ethan examined it more closely and discovered a small silver medallion sewn into the fabric. It was identical to his own, the Blackwood crest, eagle over mountain, gleaming despite years of use. His hands trembled as he traced the symbol. This was no coincidence. Ghost, Winchester, his mother's disappearance, the medallion. They were all connected, somehow. But what did it mean? And what would happen when Winchester discovered that Ethan possessed the matching medallion? As the last rays of sunlight disappeared behind the distant mountains, Ethan made a decision. He wouldn't let Ghost go without learning the truth. Whatever secrets lay hidden behind the Blackwood crest, they were part of his story too. He deserved answers. With newfound determination, he tucked his medallion back under his shirt and melted into the gathering darkness. He would watch and wait. Winchester might be taking Ghost away, but this wasn't the end. Somehow, Ethan knew their paths would cross again. The town of Copper Canyon awoke to unexpected news the following morning. Mr. Winchester had not departed as planned. Instead, he had extended his stay indefinitely, taking a room at Mrs. Holloway's boarding house on the edge of town. Even more surprising was that Ghost remained tied at the post, though now with a canvas shelter hastily erected to provide shade. Rumors spread faster than desert wildfire. Some said Winchester had discovered valuable mineral deposits on unclaimed land nearby. Others whispered that he was investigating old land grants that might overturn current ownership. Whatever the reason, his continued presence created a ripple of unease throughout the community. Ethan observed these developments from a distance, relief at Ghost's continued presence mixing with anxiety about Winchester's intentions. The boy had taken Sheriff Bradley's advice and become more discreet in his visits to the horse, coming only at dawn or after nightfall when few people were about. But he couldn't stay away entirely. The pull between him and Ghost had grown too strong. 3 days after Winchester's intended departure date, Ethan slipped through the early morning shadows toward Ghost's post. The streets were empty, most residents still asleep in their beds. A thin veil of mist hung over the canyon, unusual for the desert, but not unheard of during the transitional season between summer and fall. Ghost nickered softly as Ethan approached, the sound like a greeting between old friends. The horse looked better cared for now. Someone had brushed his coat and provided fresh water. Winchester might have had a change of heart about the animal's treatment, but Ethan still didn't trust the man's intentions. "Morning, Ghost," Ethan whispered, stroking the horse's neck. "Looks like your master's decided to treat you proper. About time, I reckon." "He's not my master," came a voice from behind him. "Merely my temporary keeper." Ethan spun around, heart hammering, to find Winchester standing a few paces away, watching him with those penetrating hawk-like eyes. The man wore no jacket, his white shirt open at the collar, giving him a less formal appearance than before. "Sir, I was just—" Ethan began, backing away. Winchester held up a hand. "No need for explanations, boy. Sheriff Bradley informed me of your attachment to Phantom." "Phantom," Ethan repeated. "The horse's name." Winchester gestured toward Ghost. "Though I understand you've been calling him something else." Ethan swallowed hard. "Ghost, because of his color." A hint of amusement flickered across Winchester's face. "Appropriate enough. Though Phantom has been his name since birth, he comes from a distinguished bloodline. The Blackwoods," Ethan said before he could stop himself. Winchester's eyes narrowed. "You know of the Blackwood family? Mr. Crowley mentioned them, said they bred fine horses before they—" Ethan hesitated, unsure how to delicately reference a family's demise. "Before they were destroyed," Winchester finished flatly. "Yes, the Blackwoods were once prominent in these territories. Now they exist only in memory, and in the bloodlines of their horses." Something in the man's tone made Ethan study him more carefully. There was a tension in Winchester's posture, a tightness around his eyes that suggested personal investment in the story. On impulse, Ethan decided to take a risk. "Is that why you're really here, sir? Something to do with the Blackwoods?" Winchester regarded him silently for a long moment, as if reassessing the boy before him. "You're perceptive for your age," he finally said. "Yes, my business in Copper Canyon relates to the Blackwood legacy. I'm searching for something that was lost many years ago." "What kind of something?" Instead of answering directly, Winchester approached Ghost and ran a hand along the horse's flank. "Do you know what happened to the Blackwood family, Ethan?" The use of his name startled the boy. He hadn't realized Winchester knew it. "Not really, sir. Just bits and pieces from town gossip." Winchester nodded, his expression distant. 15 years ago, the Blackwoods were one of the most respected ranching families in the territory. They had land, wealth, political connections, but they also had enemies, particularly the Prescott Mining Consortium, who wanted access to copper deposits discovered on Blackwood property. Ethan's breath caught. "Prescott? As in Joseph Prescott?" "The same." Winchester's eyes sharpened. "You know the name?" "He came to town about 3 years back, right before my mother." Ethan trailed off, uncomfortable sharing his personal history with this enigmatic stranger. "Before your mother disappeared," Winchester finished for him. His voice had softened slightly, showing the first hint of genuine emotion Ethan had witnessed from the man. "Yes, Joseph Prescott has a habit. of leaving chaos in his wake. The statement hung in the air between them, loaded with unspoken implications. Ethan felt a surge of hope. Could this man know something about his mother's fate? "What happened to the Blackwoods?" Ethan asked, steering the conversation back to safer ground. Winchester sighed. "The official story is that a dispute over water rights led to armed conflict. Several men died, including Edward Blackwood, the family patriarch. His eldest son, James, was away at school back east at the time. His younger son, barely a year old, disappeared along with his mother, Catherine." Winchester's voice grew tight. "The authorities declared them dead, though their bodies were never found. And the Prescotts took the Blackwood land," Ethan guessed. "Not immediately. There were legal challenges, investigations, but eventually, yes. The copper mines on former Blackwood property have made the Prescotts very wealthy indeed." Ghost shifted restlessly, as if sensing the tension in their conversation. Winchester absently stroked the horse's muzzle, calming him. "Phantom here is one of the last remaining connections to the Blackwood legacy," he continued. "Bred from their finest stock, born just before the family's downfall. I acquired him recently from a horse trader in Prescott who had no idea of his true value." Ethan's mind was racing, pieces of a puzzle beginning to align in ways that both excited and frightened him. "Sir, you never said what you're searching for in copper." "Canyon!" Winchester's gaze fixed on him with renewed intensity. "Evidence, Ethan. Evidence that might reopen the Blackwood case and bring certain parties to justice. And have you found any?" A strange smile crossed Winchester's face. "Perhaps more than I expected." Before Ethan could ask what he meant, the conversation was interrupted by Sheriff Bradley approaching from down the street, his expression grim. "Mr. Winchester," the sheriff called. "Got a message for you, sir. Ryder came in early this morning." Winchester straightened, his demeanor instantly reverting to the cool, distant manner Ethan had first observed. "Thank you, Sheriff. I'll collect it shortly." Bradley glanced between Winchester and Ethan, his concern evident. "Everything all right here?" "Perfectly fine," Winchester assured him. "Young Ethan and I were just discussing horses." He turned to the boy. "You're welcome to visit Phantom anytime, though perhaps not alone. These are uncertain times." With that cryptic warning, Winchester nodded to them both and strode away toward the sheriff's office, leaving Ethan with more questions than answers. "What was that all about?" Sheriff Bradley asked once Winchester was out of earshot. Ethan shook his head, bewildered. "I'm not sure. He was talking about the Blackwood family and their fight with the Prescotts." Bradley's expression darkened. "That's dangerous territory, Ethan. Old wounds that haven't healed, even after 15 years. He placed a protective hand on the boy's shoulder. "Listen to me carefully. Winchester isn't who he appears to be. I sent a telegram to contacts in Prescott after he arrived. The replies have been concerning." "What do you mean?" The sheriff looked around to ensure they wouldn't be overheard. "There's no record of a businessman named Winchester connected to the mining operations, but there is a James Blackwood who recently returned to the territory. After years back east." The revelation hit Ethan like a physical blow. "You think Winchester is really James Blackwood, the eldest son?" It would explain his interest in Copper Canyon, which has no particular value to outsiders except... Bradley hesitated. "Except what?" "Except that your mother settled here after leaving Prescott region 15 years ago, with a baby boy." The implication was clear, and it aligned with the suspicions already forming in Ethan's mind. "You think I might be the younger Blackwood's son?" Bradley finished quietly. "It would explain your mother's medallion and why she was so afraid when Joseph Prescott showed up in town. The timing fits." Ethan's world tilted on its axis. Everything he thought he knew about himself, his identity, his history, even his name suddenly seemed uncertain. His hand went to the medallion beneath his shirt. "But why wouldn't she tell me?" he whispered. Why keep it secret? To protect you, Bradley said simply. If you really are Edward Blackwood Jr., then you're the rightful heir to property worth millions now that copper's been discovered on it. That's more than enough reason for certain people to want you gone. The weight of this potential truth pressed down on Ethan like a physical force. If what the sheriff suggested was true, then his mother hadn't abandoned him. She'd been silenced, perhaps permanently, to prevent her from revealing his true identity. And now James Blackwood, if Winchester indeed was James, had come looking for his lost brother, perhaps the final piece of evidence needed to reclaim what had been stolen from their family. "What should I do?" Ethan asked, his voice small against the enormity of the situation. Bradley squeezed his shoulder. "For now, nothing. Keep your head down and your medallion hidden. I need to gather more information before we make any moves. Winchester, or Blackwood, clearly has his own agenda, and we can't be sure how much of it involves your welfare." Ethan nodded, though his mind was already churning with possibilities. If Winchester truly was his brother, didn't he deserve to know? But caution won out. The sheriff was right. Until they knew more about Winchester's intentions, revealing himself would be dangerous. As the day progressed, Ethan found it increasingly difficult to maintain his normal routine. Every glance from a townsperson seemed loaded with new meaning. Did they know? Had they suspected all along that Sarah Miller wasn't his mother's real name, that they were hiding in plain sight? He found himself drawn back to Ghost or Phantom repeatedly. Throughout the day, finding comfort in the horse's steady presence, the animal seemed to sense his turmoil, standing quietly while Ethan leaned against his solid warmth. "Were you there?" Ethan whispered during one such visit. "Did you know them? My family." Phantom's dark eye regarded him solemnly, as if the horse carried memories of a time and place beyond Ethan's reach. The boy stroked the animal's neck, his fingers finding the Blackwood brand that had first connected them. Late that afternoon, as shadows lengthened across Copper Canyon, Ethan noticed unusual activity at the sheriff's office. Bradley was speaking, intently, with several men, including Winchester. Their expressions were grave, their gestures animated. Something had happened. Ethan edged closer, trying to overhear without being noticed. He caught fragments of conversation. Prescott men arriving tomorrow, potential confrontation. Fear gripped him. If Prescott's men were coming to Copper Canyon, it could only mean one thing. They knew or suspected Winchester's true identity and purpose, and if they discovered Ethan's potential connection to the Blackwoods. As the meeting dispersed, Winchester caught sight of Ethan watching from across the street. The man's expression changed subtly, a flicker of something that might have been concern or perhaps determination. He said something to Sheriff Bradley, who turned to look at Ethan as well, nodding in response to whatever Winchester had proposed. Winchester then approached Ethan directly, his stride purposeful. "Walk with me," he said quietly, when he reached the boy, and tried to look casual. Confused but compliant, Ethan fell into step beside him. They moved down the main street toward the edge of town, Winchester acknowledging greetings from passers-by with practiced ease. "Things are about to become complicated," Winchester said once they were relatively alone. "Men connected to Joseph Prescott will arrive in Copper Canyon tomorrow, ostensibly on mining business. But really, they're looking for you," Ethan guessed. Winchester glanced at him with new respect. "Yes, my true identity has apparently been discovered sooner than I anticipated." "You're James Blackwood," Ethan said. It wasn't a question. The man's steps faltered momentarily. "Sheriff Bradley has been busy, I see," he sighed. "Yes, though I would appreciate your discretion on the matter for now." They had reached Phantom, who greeted them with a soft wicker. James, it was difficult for Ethan to think of him as anything else now, untied the horse and began leading him toward the livery stable. "Are you leaving?" Ethan asked, surprised by how much the prospect bothered him. Not exactly, James replied. But I need to secure Phantom somewhere less exposed. The stable owner has agreed to house him in a private stall. As they walked, Ethan gathered his courage for the question burning in his mind. Mr. Winchester, Mr. Blackwood, did you come to Copper Canyon looking for more than just evidence? James stopped, turning to face Ethan fully. The setting sun cast his features in sharp relief, highlighting a resemblance that Ethan now realized. He should have noticed before, the same high cheekbones, the same set of the jaw that Ethan saw whenever he caught his reflection in still water or shop windows. I came looking for my brother, James said simply. Edward Blackwood Jr., who disappeared with his mother Catherine 15 years ago. I've spent years tracing rumors, following dead ends, until information led me here, to Copper Canyon. And have you found him? Ethan's voice was barely above, a whisper. James reached out slowly, his fingers brushing the chain around Ethan's neck, drawing the medallion out from beneath his shirt. The silver gleamed in the fading light, the eagle and mountain crest unmistakable. I believe I have, James said softly. His eyes, when they met Ethan's, were filled with an emotion the boy had never seen directed at him before, recognition, mingled with profound grief and joy, though he goes by a different name now. The world seemed to still around them. Phantom nudged Ethan's shoulder gently, as if confirming the truth that had been hidden for so long. My mother, Ethan began, struggling to form the question. James's expression grew solemn. Catherine Blackwood was a remarkable woman. After our father's death, she fled with you to protect you from those who would use you to control the family assets. She changed your names, created new identities. She was meticulous, careful. His voice broke slightly. I've been searching for both of you since I came of age and gained access to family resources. But you only found me, Ethan said, the implication clear. James nodded, his grief evident. 3 years ago, Catherine, or Sarah as she was known here, discovered that Joseph Prescott had traced her to Copper Canyon. According to what I've learned, she left immediately to lead him away from you. He paused, choosing his words carefully. She did not survive the encounter. The confirmation of what Ethan had long suspected, that his mother was gone forever, should have devastated him. Instead, it brought a strange sort of peace. She hadn't abandoned him. She had given her life to protect him. How can you be sure I'm him? Ethan asked, needing absolute certainty before accepting this new identity. Edward Blackwood Jr. James smiled sadly. The medallion is compelling evidence. Each family member received one at birth, and yours has your initials on the back. But there's more. You have our mother's eyes, our father's stubborn chin, and Phantom recognized you immediately. Phantom? He was bred on our ranch. Our mother often took you to the stables as a baby. Horses have long memories, especially for those who treated them with kindness. James stroked Phantom's neck. When I saw how he responded to you, I knew my search was over. The significance of the horse's role in their reunion wasn't lost on Ethan. Without Phantom, James might never have confirmed his suspicions. Without Ethan's care for the abandoned animal, the connection might never have been made. What happens now? Ethan asked, suddenly aware of the dangerous situation they were in. If Prescott's men are coming... James's expression hardened. Now, we prepare. Sheriff Bradley is a good man, but he can't protect us against what's coming. We need to be ready to leave Copper Canyon by tomorrow night. Leave, but this is my home. It's not safe anymore, James insisted. Once Prescott confirms who you are, your life will be in danger. We need to get you to Prescott, where my lawyers have prepared legal challenges to reclaim our family's property. Your existence changes everything. As father's last living heir, born before his death, your claim supersedes any arrangements made after the family's supposed extinction. The magnitude of the situation was overwhelming. In the span of a single conversation, Ethan had gained a brother, confirmed his mother's fate, discovered his true identity, and now faced leaving the only home he could remember. As if sensing his turmoil, Phantom pressed his muzzle against Ethan's chest, directly over the hidden medallion. The simple gesture of comfort from the animal who had brought the brothers together steadied him. "We both owe Phantom our gratitude," James said softly, observing the interaction. "In caring for him when I couldn't, you revealed your true character and our shared blood." Ethan wrapped an arm around the horse's neck, drawing strength from the animal's solid presence. "He's more than just a horse," he said. "He's family too." James nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Then he comes with us, wherever this journey leads." He placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder, the gesture tentative, as if he feared rejection. "Will you trust me, brother? Will you help me restore what was taken from us?" In that moment, with his hand on Phantom's neck and his brother's hand on his shoulder, Ethan felt something he hadn't experienced since his mother disappeared. A sense of belonging, of connection to something larger than himself. He thought of his mother's sacrifice, of the years James had spent searching, of the justice long denied to their family. "Yes," he said simply, "I trust you." The setting sun cast their shadows long across the dusty street. Two brothers and a horse, united by blood and circumstance, preparing to face whatever challenges awaited them. The horse that had once seemed abandoned had become the silent bond connecting a family torn apart by greed and violence. And Ethan, once a forgotten orphan on the margins of society, now stood at the threshold of a new life, one that honored his mother's sacrifice and embraced his true heritage. Dawn broke over Copper Canyon in a wash of amber and gold. In the livery stable, Ethan, now Edward Blackwood Jr. in his own mind, sat beside Phantom's stall, drawing comfort from the white horse's steady presence. "Ready?" James appeared in the doorway, silhouetted against the brightening sky. Ethan nodded, though he felt anything but ready. The plan they had formed with Sheriff Bradley was simple. Confront Joseph Prescott with evidence of Ethan's identity, then depart for the territorial capital where courts could formally recognize his claim to the Blackwood estate. Sheriff Bradley sent word that riders were spotted from the north, James continued, checking his revolver. "They'll be here within the hour." Ethan stroked Phantom's neck. "Will there be trouble?" "Almost certainly," James answered honestly. "Prescott built his empire on our family's destruction. He won't surrender it easily." Before leaving the stable, Ethan pulled out a small oilskin packet, something his mother had hidden years ago, instructing him never to open it unless she didn't return. Inside lay a letter and a small brass key. "It's from Mother," Ethan said, unfolding the yellowed paper carefully. The letter confirmed everything: his true identity as Edward Blackwood Jr., the meaning of his medallion, and the existence of hidden documents that would prove his claim to the family estate. Catherine's final words to her son spoke of love, justice, and the true meaning of wealth, kindness toward others. "She knew this day would come," James said softly after reading it. "She prepared for it, even as she hoped it never would." The sound of approaching horses interrupted their conversation. Through the window, they could see 6 riders entering town, led by a silver-haired man whose bearings suggested authority and privilege. "Joseph Prescott," James confirmed, his voice tight. Together, the brothers walked toward the center of town, where Sheriff Bradley already stood waiting. Townspeople watched from doorways and windows, sensing the significance of the moment unfolding in their quiet community. "James Blackwood," Prescott called, his voice carrying across the street. "Still chasing ghosts, I see." "No ghosts today, Joseph," James replied evenly. "Only hard truths and legal realities." The confrontation escalated quickly. Prescott produced warrants for James's arrest on charges of fraud. James countered by introducing Ethan as Edward Blackwood Jr., the rightful heir to the Blackwood estate, presenting the medallion and letter as evidence. "Preposterous," Prescott declared. Edward Blackwood Jr. disappeared with his mother 15 years ago. Both were declared legally dead. No trace because Catherine deliberately disappeared to protect her son from you, James countered. She became Sarah Miller, and her son became Ethan. The revelation sent ripples through the watching townspeople, who all remembered the quiet seamstress who had disappeared 3 years earlier. Sheriff Bradley stepped forward, revealing that he had conducted his own investigation. "I've received telegrams from the territorial capital. Several former Prescott employees have turned over evidence to federal marshals, evidence that you orchestrated the attack on the Blackwood Ranch and arranged Catherine Blackwood's disappearance when you found her in Copper Canyon." The accusation struck Ethan like a physical blow. Something inside him shifted, fear transforming into purpose. He stepped forward, facing Prescott directly. "You took my mother from me," he said, voice steady. "You stole our home, our name, our history." He drew himself up tall. "My name is Edward Blackwood Jr. My mother was Catherine Blackwood. She died protecting me from you, and I'm not afraid anymore." The simple declaration echoed across the town square. In that moment, Ethan truly became Edward, claiming not just a name, but an identity and purpose. Tension mounted as Prescott reached toward his coat. Sheriff Bradley's revolver appeared instantly. "I wouldn't, Joseph. Not in my town." The standoff was interrupted by Miss Harper riding toward them with an urgent telegram. Federal marshals were en route with arrest warrants for Prescott on charges of fraud, intimidation, and involvement in Catherine Blackwood's disappearance. "You see," Bradley explained, "I've been gathering evidence since Sarah disappeared. With James's return and Edward's identity confirmed, the pieces finally fit together." Prescott's men surrendered one by one, sensing the collapse of their employer's power. Only Prescott remained defiant, but his threats rang hollow as his carefully constructed empire crumbled around him. From the direction of the livery stable came Phantom, somehow freed from his stall. The white horse pushed through the crowd to reach Ethan, the Blackwood brand on his neck clearly visible to all, final confirmation of the truth that had been hidden for so long. As Prescott was led away to the jailhouse, he paused to look at Ethan one last time. "You're more like your father than you know, boy. He couldn't leave well enough alone either." "I'll take that as a compliment," Ethan replied. "From what I've heard, my father was a good man who stood for what was right." When the excitement subsided, James turned to Ethan. "It will take time to sort everything out legally. Are you ready for that?" Ethan looked around at the town that had been his only home, then at his brother and at Phantom. "I think so, but I want to do it right. Not just take back what's ours, but make sure it benefits people who need help." He remembered his mother's words. Mother's letter said, "True wealth is in how we treat others. I want to honor that." The following day, as they prepared to depart for the Blackwood Ranch, Sheriff Bradley presented Ethan with a small wooden box containing a family photograph, his first glimpse of his parents together with himself as a baby and young James. "Ready?" James asked, mounted beside him. Ethan patted Phantom's neck, looking ahead toward the distant mountains and the legacy waiting to be reclaimed. "Ready," he confirmed. Together they rode out of town side by side, with Phantom leading the way, not just toward a reclaimed inheritance, but toward a future where truth had triumphed over deception and justice, long delayed, had finally been served. The abandoned horse had found his rightful master, the forgotten boy had found his true name, and together they had found their way home. Dear listeners, we hope that Ethan and Phantom's journey touched your heart. If you were moved by their story of identity, courage, and justice, please subscribe to our channel, leave a like, and share in the comments what moved you most. Remember that every story we share is a reminder that even in our darkest moments, connections formed in kindness can change everything. Join us for more tales that celebrate the unbreakable bonds between humans and animals that help us discover who we truly are.